This morning's speaker is Major General John P. Johnson, the Deputy Commander of U.S. Army Pacific Command. Major General Pete Johnson assumed duties as the Deputy Commanding General for the United States Army Pacific on July 1st, 2018. Prior to arriving at Fort Shafter, he served as the Commanding General for the U.S. Army Training Center and Fort Jackson, South Carolina. He was privileged to have commanded troops from company to two-star level and deployed to multiple combat tours, including Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom in Afghanistan and Iraq. Operation Provide Comfort in Iraq, Operation Just Cause in Panama. Over the past 33 years, he served in a variety of Army and Joint Command staff positions, including the 7th Infantry Division, the 75th Ranger Regiment, the Southern European Task Force, the Joint Special Operations Command, the 82nd Airborne Division, and the 25th Infantry Division. Major General Johnson and his wife have been blessed to be married for 25 years of marriage, and they have 3 phenomenal children. If you have any questions for the General, please text those to the address located on the screens. They will be provided for General Johnson to answer. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming this morning's speaker, Major General Johnson.
Well, thanks for that kind introduction, Gina. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your leadership here. You know, junior officer making it happen. Well, aloha. It's participatory this morning. Aloha. And good morning, and thanks, Admiral Dick Mackey and Lieutenant General Bob Wood, Lieutenant General Shea, and the entire AFCEA International and Hawaii team for the invitation to be here today. I applaud especially the commitment displayed here this morning to the purpose of this great forum, as I am sure many would rather be sipping some coffee, looking out across the beautiful sand and ocean we are blessed with here on Waikiki, or maybe even spending some quality time recovery from last night. I also want to let you know that I'm under a little more pressure than usual to deliver here this morning with my sister and her husband in the audience. Yeah. They are both retired from the Air Force. We won't hold that against them. You know, beat Air Force, right? And we did this year again. And my sister now serves as a government civilian working at DISA. So I also know at least one booth I'll definitely visit before I leave, and I'll try not to let you down, Trish. This forum has great history here in Hawaii and is a wonderful opportunity to connect across academia, business, and government. And as a member of the military, I recognize that the capabilities in our force are improved through a robust and legal exchange of ideas and perspectives across all of that. So on behalf of General Bob Brown, the Commander of the United States Army Pacific, thanks to all for being a part of this important forum at this incredibly important time for our nation and the nations across the Indo-Pacific. I understand that yesterday, before this forum, Admiral Davidson provided a compelling review of the free and open Indo-Pacific vision and strategy, one that reinforces the policy and intent of our nation and what our nation has projected for the past 200 plus years. As I can attest from my own travel and engagement, it resonates across the region because it emphasizes our common interest in sovereignty, rule of law, free trade, access to the commons, and stability, especially against a backdrop of hyper-competition where the key competitor espouses closure and control. The military plays a vital role in our whole-of-government approach to assure a free and open Indo-Pacific, and I'd like to share with you the Army in the Pacific's contribution to this very worthy endeavor. So while a map of the region displays more water than land, never forget where the people, their government, and many of their resources reside. And when you look through the lenses of most of our allies and partners, their military forces tend to be predominantly land and defensive in purpose. So as our government pursues the objective of a constellation of like-minded nations, the Army in the Pacific plays a critical role, engaging allies and partners daily across this great region to reinforce our common values, improve their capabilities, and to build interoperability. First, a quick primer on this region for the land context. The Indo-Pacific is astoundingly large and a tyranny of exceptional distance, as we all know, 36 countries, 16 time zones, but 7 of the 10 most largest armies in the world. And the vast majority have as their chiefs of defense an Army officer. In just a few decades, 70% of the world will live in this region. That's people on the land, many of them in megacities that are concentrated here. To support the exponential population growth and increasing demand in this region, 100,000 commercial carriers pass through the Strait of Malacca each year. That's a narrow strip of water between land. 1/4 of the world's trade to support the fastest growing market economies in the world, to include countries like Vietnam. Vietnam itself is a fascinating story, one that reflects the rapidly changing environment we operate in and reflects the value of persistent and consistent military-to-military engagement. 5 years ago, while I was stationed up at Schofield Barracks as the Deputy Commanding General for the 25th Infantry Division, I met with a delegation from Vietnam. We were extraordinarily cautious on both sides, with a clear recognition that baby steps were in order to advance our military-to-military relationship. So what did we do? We took them out to Duke's out here on Waikiki and had dinner. Not a baby step. Given our history, expectations were low. As we walked into our headquarters, one of the first visuals was a display of our unit's combat streamers, many which represented our service in the Vietnam War. I actually wasn't smart enough to anticipate this, but quickly showed them an equal number of streamers highlighting the World War II service, which I then suggested that historically many of our worst enemies have become our best friends. I mean, think about that. If you go to the Army flag and look at the campaign streamers, many of those enemies today are our allies. And that's what we were aiming for with them. Fast forward to my arrival this past summer to U.S. Army Pacific, and one of the first trips I took as the Deputy Commanding General was to Vietnam. Along with the United States, this past summer, Vietnam co-hosted the Pacific Army's Management Seminar, a conference that brings together the heads of Army for the entire Indo-Pacific, and it is the U.S. Army Pacific's premier conference. I was blown away. In 5 short years, Vietnam went from a nascent relationship to a robust and important partnership, one of our most important partnerships in the Indo-Pacific. And we're pursuing these same kinds of relationships throughout the region as competition becomes increasingly the norm and countries seek to coalesce with nations where there are mutual interests. And we are finding it easier to identify those common interests. Our sense is that countries across the region, especially the militaries, are viewing the U.S. as the clear partner of choice, who will, while defending our values, also respect sovereignty and the rule of law, and who will assist them in achieving their position as a like-minded partner in the Indo-Pacific. The coercive and controlling actions of China are actually presenting greater opportunities for the U.S. and our like-minded allies and partners. Unfortunately, the other reality in the Indo-Pacific that generates common interest is the constant threat of natural disasters. While the militaries may not be purpose-built for this effort, we are uniquely capable to support broader governmental and non-governmental efforts. More natural disasters happen in this region of the world than any other. A 2016 United Nations report stated that by 2020, 1 billion people living in the Indo-Pacific will reside in disaster-prone areas classified as high to extreme risk. As these disasters continue to happen on the scales the likes of which we've rarely seen, with devastation and deaths surpassing historical numbers, we must be ready to support those nations with whom we share the commitment of safety and security. And in some cases, it is the only viable avenue to pursue military-to-military coordination and collaboration. And that's okay. It's our respect for sovereignty and the intersection of interests that ultimately will prevail. And whether it is building the combat capability or the capacity to support humanitarian disaster relief, we seek interoperability solutions with our allies and partners. It is clearly one of the strong arguments we present in support of U.S. foreign military sales, which tend to be inherently interoperable, but not always. By interoperable, I mean integrated, technologically, multilaterally, jointly, and intergovernmentally. Working within stovepipes is old think. Working outside of and beyond those stovepipes has to be the norm. Here in the U.S. Army Pacific, we also prepare our forces to fight and win as part of the joint force should we fail to deter. Our focus here is to develop multi-domain capabilities and doctrine that evolve beyond joint interdependence to true joint integration. We firmly believe that multi-domain operations are inherently more joint, will provide the combatant commander more options to compete, and if necessary, to win by providing more ways to converge capabilities and to present multiple dilemmas across all the domains, and not just air, land, and maritime, but also cyber and space. And the obvious role that advanced technologies will play in all is very apparent. But more importantly, the necessary interoperability to enable multi-domain operations is even more pressing. One of the most important ways that America's Army in the Pacific pursues this interoperability is through a concept we call Pacific Pathways. It's a series of bilateral and multilateral exercises woven together where nations work together through joint operations and exercising and training to achieve both readiness and interoperability. The next evolution of this program to be put into practice next year has formations training with allies and partners for extended periods of time. We're talking 4 to 6 months. This allows us to go beyond the typically shallow, scripted training of shorter exercises and genuinely work with other nations on tougher problem sets not so easily solved with canned scenarios. Pacific Pathways is the U.S. Army Pacific's premier program in generating force readiness, no matter the challenge, and being gracious guests of our friends and partners develops the relationships and deepens the relationships that are so critical to achieving and maintaining peace in the Indo-Pacific. We also participate in another critical exercise hosted by our Navy teammates. Rim of the Pacific, or RIMPAC, is the world's largest international maritime exercise held here in Hawaii. This past fall, the Army introduced one of its newest concepts, the multi-domain task force, in the form of a pilot program. The task force is designed to be joint and will seamlessly integrate kinetic and non-kinetic capabilities to provide multiple opportunities for the commander and multiple dilemmas for the enemy. At the time of this pilot program, we had a decent understanding of what we wanted this task force to do, but a slightly vaguer notion of what it should look like. The young men and women who made up this new task force concept immediately identified its gaps and started working towards solutions, especially with respect to the inherent interoperability challenges. Two instances stand out. One speaks to trust, and the other to technology. The first was a young, intrepid sergeant who made his way onto a carrier bridge to convince a Navy captain, an air boss, sounds like a really important fella, to let his Army drone fly in the carrier's airspace. The sergeant had already been told no, but when he persisted to get this audience, the air boss was rightly impressed and listened him out. Trust was needed. The second was when a young captain told the Chief of Staff of the United States Army that in spite of his stovepipe communications, meaning Army systems that only integrated with other Army systems, which of course made the chief really happy, he and his sister service colleagues derived a joint network that made joint communication possible through Band-Aids and patches that ultimately allowed the effects of the exercise to materialize. It was those innovative and courageous thinkers closest to the problems that powered through the roadblocks, some of trust and others of a technological nature. This forum, I do believe, can advance thinking and solutions to help in both of these vital areas. Technology can be a game changer. We have to come up with newer, better, faster technologies, but they must empower people. We should never again have an Army-only solution. We are probably not well served even with a U.S.-only solution. Interoperability is the new coin of the realm. That you're here means you and I have shared interest in finding solutions that will allow like-minded militaries to operate in concert. You are also vital in assuring the dominance of the United States Army and the rest of the joint force to operate in a multi-domain context, where trust and interoperability are essential. Your attendance at this forum is critical for our successful efforts in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. The conversations you have here are key to the innovative, creative ideas that will provide solutions to some of our greatest challenges. I appreciate your collective attention to make a difference in all of this. Mahalo, and thanks for having me this morning. I look forward to your questions. Thanks.
Go ahead with me. Good morning, sir. First question. As the Army looks across the Indo-Pacific region, and with the emphasis on land warfare, do you feel that sufficient force transportation is in place to move soldiers, warfighting equipment, and supplies to support either sustained combat or disaster relief?
I mean, the simple answer is I think it's a high-risk proposition. And the essential quality that we wrestle against, obviously, is the tyranny of the distance involved in the complexity of the maritime terrain, especially as you take a look at the island chains that we have to deal with. So it is something that we're constantly looking at. I know across the services, we're constantly trying to identify new and innovative ways to deliver logistics across that tyranny of distance. So I do think it is a challenge. It is one that is also very costly for the Joint Force. And as we take a look at the trades necessary to generate the Joint Force capability, it is one of the tougher spots in our dialogue. So do we have sufficient force transportation? The answer is I think we've got the force transportation requirements, but once that comes against the threat and the tyranny of this distance, I do believe there's risks there that we've got to pay attention to. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, sir. Next question. We've been pursuing interoperability capabilities in the Pacific for years. With your time out here, where do you see real progress in fielded capabilities, and what new technologies would help the cause?
Well, I think we're seeing great progress in our ability to communicate with one another. We've got to make sure that as we operate with our allies and partners, we can communicate. It still remains a challenge. I don't think, and I have not seen, even in the time I've spent here in the Pacific, sort of the silver bullet answer. It requires a dedicated and committed, actions with each of our partners who have their own outlooks on how they want to communicate within their force to achieve multilateral communication. But I have seen some progress in recognizing the challenge, especially amongst our most closest allies. We've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. Where I believe we've gained the most progress actually is identifying risks out there in the environment that we need to organize for, especially with our allies. In some cases, I think General Brown would tell you, and he's got the tremendous, more amount of experience in Pacific than I do, but in 30 years of experience in Pacific, one of the big transformations that he's observed has been, partners where we used to have to really push are now pulling us because of their recognition of the competition in their environment. And they're asking us to move faster and harder to achieve a level of interoperability and multinational, multilateral capability. And so we see that as a positive sign. Japan is a key example of that. It used to be much harder to work that effort 30 years ago. Today, they're drawing us forward. They're seeking innovative solutions, even in technologies, to achieve a level of capability that actually will create more stability in the environment.
Thank you, sir. What is the impact of postponing large joint exercises on the Korean Peninsula on readiness?
Well, for us, we'll build readiness whether we're on the Korean Peninsula or we're back at home station. That is our number one priority as an Army. And so those forces that would have deployed to Korea are continuing to train, to be ready. We do lose a little bit of our understanding of that environment, and so there is risk. So for those forces that don't exercise in the environment that they might have to fight in, lose that opportunity. And so it is not without risk. but we're not standing on our hands or, in the meantime. We continue at home station or at other locations away from the Korean Peninsula to generate the readiness necessary to fight and win either on the peninsula or elsewhere.
Thank you. Could you provide us with a brief overview of the Army Force Modernization Program and how it is progressing?
Well, that's a mouthful there. That's a tough one. There are a lot of guys in the Pentagon that would love to answer that one. It's a comprehensive program. It's got 6 major priorities to it. One of the key ones that we focus on here in the Army Pacific, and it's tied directly to our multi-domain operations capability that we're trying to generate, is long-range precision fires that will allow us to achieve the effects that we need against an anti-area defense that in this theater China has created in the South China Sea and the East China Sea. So there's plenty of the modernization effort that I think will have direct impact here in the Pacific. But suffice it to say that one of the things that the Army is attempting to do as it has prioritized readiness over the last few years as we've come out of an era of conflict, of counterinsurgency, we're trying to really regenerate over time the readiness to compete and fight and win against near peer and peer competitors. We see the modernization program as essential for the long haul. We've traded off a modernization over the last 15, 20 years. And now what we're doing is rebalancing that effort while attempting to retain the readiness that we've gained, now rebalancing towards a more comprehensive modernization program looking 20, 30 years into the future.
Thank you. We have time for 2 more questions. The first one, the Army has fielded a number of cross-functional teams under Army Futures Command. How is USERPAC tied into these efforts?
Yeah, these cross-functional teams, they're tied to each of our modernization priorities. The one key way we're tied to them, I really already spoke to. General Brown, as the commander of U.S. Army Pacific, is the mentor for the cross-functional team aligned to long-range precision fires. And so as they generate solutions in partnership with industry and others, they're being informed by the operational outlook of the command here in the Pacific as we work to assure that we can operate as a member of the Joint Force. So I think that's a very direct way in the way our experience in this environment and our understanding of our operational war plans and the needs of the land component in support of the Joint Force directly to Army modernization through this vehicle, as you've identified, is this cross-functional teams that the Army's developed. They went down this path of cross-functional teams to really tighten the shot group and speed the ability for Army senior leaders to identify the challenges as well as the solutions and innovate rapidly inside a highly bureaucratic acquisition process. And so I think we're seeing some benefits of our cross-functional team approach, but more importantly, I think one of the key aspects of it is the link of these cross-functional teams to the operational force, and with U.S. Army Pacific directly with long-range precision fires.
Thank you, sir. The final question, can you address how your command is accounting for growing cyber threats? And then as a part 2 that just came in, are there any specific exercises for cyber readiness across coalition partners?
I think we're seeing cyber as one of our key domains. as talked about, it's not just now the air, land, and maritime, but cyber and space are integral into all of our operations. We're integrating cyber activities and cyber aspects into all Army operations and all of our exercises. The multi-domain task force that I spoke to, in its integration with RIMPAC, has a cyber component to it. And so we are working diligently to figure out how do we operate against this growing cyber threat from the tactical level through the operational and strategic level. And we're doing that through all of our exercises. Those exercises that are tactical in nature, we're integrating a cyber aspect to them to ensure that we're servicing that. Those that are operational and strategic, we're also integrating. So I would tell you, I think it's holistic. It is across the board, and there's not just one exercise that we're pinning cyber to. We're seeing it as we are with the other domains as integral to our ability to operate, and not only in competition, but if necessary, in the warfight.
Thank you, sir. That was the final question. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant General Bob Wood, Executive Vice President of AFCEA International, to the stage.
Well, thank you, General Johnson. Thank you very much. I got to put this down a little bit here. It is great to get another picture of the operational challenges out here. General Johnson, thank you for coming over and giving us that Army Pacific look at it. You might have noticed in his bio, Operation Just Cause, this warfighter's been in our Army for a long time and has seen a lot of transition. Transition away from the pure competition and back to the pure competition. And it's that exact perspective that allows you to have these words today and present it in a way that's believable, understandable, and we're awfully happy the Army's brought you to the Pacific again to see your sister, but also to join us in AFCEA. We've got a coin, we'll challenge you on the spot. I'm going to give this to you on behalf of the team, on behalf of our conference, AFCEA International, AFCEA Hawaii, and I think there's an AFCEA membership for you on the way out the door. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Major General Johnson, and thank you, Lieutenant General Woods. Before we conclude this morning's, bring it down a level. Before we conclude this morning's event, I have a few administrative remarks. Please download the AFCEA 365 app, it's free, for details on panels and the continuing education courses. This year's conference Wi-Fi was sponsored by Perspecta. In addition, Perspecta is also providing parking passes. Attendees can stop by the Sea Pearl 2 room to get your pass. At 9:45 this morning, we have the US PACOM J2 panel titled Incorporating Cyber into Multi-Domain Operations in the South Pacific Ballroom. At 11:30, we have a ticketed lunch. It will be served on the exhibition floor. 2:30, the Young AFCEAN panel, that's the YACS, all you out there, is titled How Data is Changing Our World, Using Big Data Analytics and the Cloud Computing to Inform Your Organization. Tickets to this evening's Pauhana event is sponsored by Sienna and CenturyLink. There's tickets available. Please purchase them at the registration desk. If you are a YAC, please come see me and I will hook you up. All right, Cinemask. It's an industry leader in the high-performance video wall systems. They're providing a live streaming of the STEM Room Invocation Showcase. It's located upstairs in the South Pacific Ballroom 1 to see the Polynesian Voyage Society and to spin the wheel for a special prize. Ladies, again, I want to thank you for attending this morning's breakfast. This concludes this event. Thank you.